this is exactly what he was. I had to see it. Strange. I suddenly had this feeling that everything was connected. It's like I could see the whole thing. Felt like I could see everything that had happened and everything that was going to happen. It was like a perfect pattern. And I realized that we were all part of it.
So do you know what's going to happen?
No. It was a feeling. But I can guess.
Most of our positive emotions have to do with such things as relief, which means essentially being freed from certain kinds of worries and other negative emotions. Another kind of interesting, but again perhaps unfortunate, element of this is that we are emotional mainly with respect to change.
What was that? It came from up above. What's that force? Spirit energy? It's too different. This isn't like any spirit energy I've ever experienced before. It's not just powerful. It feels thick and heavy. It's as if there's an ocean spread above the sky. Let's hurry.
Now, grief is negative for an obvious reason. Grief involves a grievous loss. Now, the loss of a loved one is what I'm going to be talking about. Now, what's interesting here is that grief is not just sadness. Grief is not, in other words, a basic emotion. Nevertheless, grief is pretty clearly universal. All people die. All people lose people who are close to them. And what's more, all people know that they're going to die.
Are you afraid? It's over. You will die.
And so grief is all about death. But grief isn't just about death. It's about a lot more besides. When you get angry, you engage the world in a certain kind of way, and you are motivated consequently to do something about it. Freda has argued an emotion essentially involves what he calls an action tendency. So in anger, we are tempted to do something. But in grief, it seems to me people tend to do nothing. They tend to withdraw. They sort of retreat to the rooms. They don't want to talk to people. And it seemed to me that this was very much at odds with what the other emotions tended to do. But grief, and this I would say, like love, grief is a process. Because to say that an emotion is a process is to say that it is something that changes with time. It develops. That grief isn't something that happens all at once. And it's not something you can get rid of just by taking a pill. But the process of working through grief, that's grief.
So I want to know, how frightened are you?
I am not at all.
And so to think about grief as just a momentary feeling of some sort, it seems to me to be to misunderstand it. Emotions generally have to do with desires. So in anger, you want to punish someone. In love, you want to caress someone. In jealousy, you want to protect your turf. In envy, you want to take something. In shame, you want to hide. But what is the desire in grief? Well, it would seem that what you want in grief is the utterly impossible. What you would like is for the person who has died to come back.
It's not possible. That was too fast. This can't be happening. I couldn't react at all.
But grief also has the property of reminding us of our own mortality. Many years ago, the Greek philosopher Epicurus worried at length about the fear of death and came up with a rather uplifting solution. He said, in a very short phrase, death is nothing. And because it's nothing to be afraid of. You're alive, you're having experiences, you're having some pleasures, and then suddenly you're not there anymore. No more experiences, no more pleasures. So what's the problem? Instead of being a breakdown of one's normal emotional life, one can think of grief as a kind of culmination, a sad culmination to be sure, but a culmination of one's emotional life so far. And are there action tendencies? Well, yes. Withdrawing is a powerful action tendency. It's powerful action tendency of withdrawing to rethink, to recapture, to reformulate the very nature of one's life.
How incredible.
I I learned this. I realized on the way here I could use this technique. I wish I'd figured this out a bit sooner. I could have used this in some of my earlier battles.
Because what happens when you lose someone who's very close to you is that your life is, in an important sense, shattered. Because remember when we talked about love, that love is coming to identify yourself and identify yourself with and through the other person, and that's your new identity? Well, in grief, that identity has been shattered. But then the action is to withdraw and try and get oneself together and figure out, okay, now who am I?
This can't be. You can't be alive. What is that form? Who are you?
Your powers of observation continue to serve you well.
Let's start by learning a little about
The overture. Yes, the strings. Listen carefully, can you hear it? Now the brass.
I can hear
That
it.
mourning and mourning rituals, and the idea is that they are still part of this culture, and what's more, the loss that they suffered is part of the culture too. And the whole set of ceremonies, it's continuing the family, the cultural life as it's been. The point being to say that all this is not an individual loss. All this is a loss to the community as a whole, and that's exactly how it should be treated. Well, the truth is that we don't think of someone who's lost as just plain lost. We love them, and we still love them. In fact, I would suggest that grief is the continuation of love. You might say it's the other side of it, that we love them when they're here, and now we love them while they're gone.
All I have learned in the 20 years that I've been a monk I can sum up in one sentence. All that arises passes away. This I know. What he meant, of course, was this. I have learned to offer no resistance to what is. I have learned to allow the present moment to be and to accept the impermanent nature of all things and conditions. Thus have I found peace.
And this commemorative impulse is a profound action tendency in itself, so that we want to do something to keep them alive as a way of saying, I love you. In short, the truth is that death is an essential part of our lives. Very few of us are willing to make the sacrifices that the ancient Stoics and the ancient Buddhists made, cutting attachments as much as possible, because the truth is we realize that love and grief are just two sides of the same coin.
Since it is impossible to get away from the feeling, the only possibility of change is to move into it. As you go into the feeling, at first it may seem like a dark and terrifying place, and when the urge to turn away from it comes, observe it but don't act on it. Keep putting your attention on the pain, whatever it is. Stay alert, stay present, present with your whole being. As you do so, you're bringing a light into this darkness. This is the flame of your consciousness.
Grief, in some cultures, also carries with it a certain amount of laughter and joy. An Irish wake is perhaps an excellent example. But what it is first of all, a commemoration, a celebration of the person who's just been lost. But perhaps more importantly, it is also a celebration of being alive. And it seems to me that an important aspect of grief is precisely appreciating what it is to be alive and what it is to be together and to have been together. And so there's a sense in which it is not so much a loss as much as it's a continuing gain.
On a deep feeling level, you now recognize not only your own immortality, but through your own, that of every other creature as well. On the level of being, you share eternal, radiant life. These are the two aspects of compassion. In compassion, the seemingly opposite feelings of sadness and joy merge into one and become transmuted into a deep inner peace. This is the peace of God.